He's the chief Fox political anchor, host of Special Report, and the #1 best-selling author of 3 Days in January. Bret Baier just released another book. It's called 3 Days in Moscow, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of the Soviet Empire. Bret Baier joins us now live from New York. Good day to you. Good morning to you, Bret. Good to see you.
Hey, Sharon. Good morning.
Good morning. So your book actually centers on a speech that President Reagan did in 1988 in Moscow. Why did you focus on this particular speech?
Well, like I did with Eisenhower in 3 Days in January, the last 3 days of the Eisenhower administration and the farewell address, and using that to bounce back and look at Eisenhower's life, I wanted to look at another moment that may have been overlooked at the time and a big speech. And this one is the culmination of 4 summits between Reagan and Gorbachev. Reagan in Moscow, the heart of communism, speaking to Moscow State University students, talking about freedom and democracy, and really giving these students a look at the West, like this is the way you should turn. I used that moment, those 3 days, to jump back and look at Reagan's life and how he gets there. And it's really, I think, informative to today.
Indeed. And did anything surprise you as you were researching the book?
A lot surprised me about the stories. I interviewed, fortunately, there were a number of people who were there and a part of the administration who are still around, and I interviewed Secretary of State Schultz, 93, remembers meetings like they were yesterday, and his details are fantastic. A lot of oral histories from the time that never have been out there. What surprised me was how active Reagan was in writing. And we knew he wrote diaries and letters to Nancy, but we didn't really understand how much he was a part of those speeches. And like Eisenhower, was really active in that regard.
It's wonderful. We're taking a look at this video as you're talking, and it brings you back too. So what will people learn about President Reagan that maybe they didn't know before?
Well, first of all, that he used humor. I think people knew that, but he had a relationship with Mikhail Gorbachev that really was solid. And because of their relationship and trust, he was able to push Gorbachev to get to the finish line. You know, Reagan spent his life talking about communism, saying it was the ash heap of history and the Soviet Union was the evil empire. Really aggressive things at the time. Tear down this wall. And that enabled him to get to the point where this relationship was beneficial to the U.S.
And Bret, you were talking about Eisenhower and your book, 3 Days in January. What does your interest come from? With this presidential history come from?
You know, I think we have a lot that we can learn by looking back. And if, you know, you always look forward, and we're in the present and we seem like we're drinking from a fire hose every day. I'm always one tweet away from changing my rundown in the show. And I think it helps to go back and look and give some perspective, especially these leaders who had really big moments that may have been overlooked at the time.
Well, congrats to you. 3 Days in Moscow, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of the Soviet Empire looks like an incredible read. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Sharon.
Bret Baier's new book, 3 Days in Moscow, is on sale right now.